deep into innovation in nicotine and tobacco, I wanted to zoom out for a second and do it with you. I wanted to zoom out on innovation and society, because innovation is part of humankind. We take it for granted. We take innovation for granted because it's part of our DNA. Innovation is what makes our societies progress. It took us to where we are today. It's one of the key features of humankind. And I'm sure that you're all taking for granted, like I do, innovation on a daily basis. If I had to ask you, how many of you took a car or any other transportation today to come here, I'm sure most of you will raise hands, isn't it? Right? You're nodding. What about, and that's technology and innovation, right? Cars, transportation, buses, trains, whatever you took, it's innovation. It's technology put at the service of society. Let me give you another example. How many of you today have opened a fridge to do some breakfast? Right? All of you. We take it for granted. We take the fridge for granted. But the history of humanity started with attempts to keep food safe. In Europe, in Northern Europe, the Romans, others would put food under the snow or in little caves in the stone to keep it fresh, to preserve it, right? Around the world, humankind looked for solutions such as drying, salting, underground storage, fermentation, to keep the food safe. Pot-in-pot refrigeration, the Zier, which is very common in this continent. There's another way to do it. But believe me, there was a lot of technology and science that went into developing the fridges that you used most likely this morning and every day, and that you take for granted, we take for granted. And it wasn't easy at the debate, because any innovation comes with a certain degree of skepticism. It's a big contradiction of our society. On one hand, we progress through innovation. On the other hand, when innovation comes, humankind tend to be skeptical. We don't really like innovation. It changes the way we do things, right? But then we embrace it. There's a moment when humanity embraces it, and that's when we move forward. Okay? And I'm sure that you could not imagine a world without the innovations I'm going to show you, because, again, we take it for granted. But think about a world without this. Cars that gives us mobility, allows us to go to schools and take our kids, allows us to go to work, healthcare facilities when something happens. Well, we take it for granted, but at the very beginning, there was a huge debate on cars. In the UK, in the US, some courts have even associated cars to ridiculous and unsafe and impractical solutions. They associated them with ferocious animals, and there were laws called red flag laws that mandated that somebody should actually walk in front of a car to alert that this little beast was coming. Okay, this is an innovation that we take for granted, guys. Let me give you another one. This gentleman that I'm hiding with my body is Ken Olsen. Okay, he was one of the founders of Digital Equipment Corporation, one of the most dynamic companies at the very beginning of computing. So he was actually a pioneer. We're not talking about somebody who doesn't embrace innovation. The guy was a pioneer. Yet, at the time, this was a typical computer. And somebody came to him and said, can you imagine a world where people actually use this at home for their daily lives? And he said, there's no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. Okay? Of course, he was thinking about this thing here, which is bigger than a fridge. But still, that tells you about the skepticism. Rather than embracing the change, even a pioneer like him was skeptical. Okay? Let me give you my favorite example then. This one. You all have at least a phone, right? Okay, this is where it started. This telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, and this is my favorite story. Because this gentleman had a patent that he wanted to file, and he needed funding for the patent. So he called a bunch of investors in a room. Among them was Western Union, and he asked them for $100,000, okay, to finance the patent, and of course get some rights in return. These people mostly burst out laughing. The representative from Western Union stood up, and this is history, huh? I'm not making it up, stood up and said, why would anyone use this thing to call somebody else who's far away from him? And another representative called it a useless toy. Okay, so Mr. Graham Bell, who was a visionary, like all those who drive innovations, who wouldn't take this because he knew that he was doing the right thing, moved on, managed to find the funding anyway, and founded the Graham Bell Corporation, the telephone corporation, okay? By 1878, so 2 years later, the phone was spreading in the US, 2 years, guys. At that point, Western Union tried to imitate, copy the phone. And of course, what happened? A lawsuit for infringement of a patent. Okay, so they went to Mr. Graham Bell and they tried to settle, offering $25 million. And that's when Mr. Bell actually said the very famous phrase, the telephone is not for sale. And he moved on, and this made our history. Think about what the world would be today without phones that then turned, mixed with computing, and became the mobile phones we see today. And now we're moving into even newer fields with the use of AI for information sharing, creation, and everything. Look at the pace of innovation. It changes our lives for better. The aeroplane is another fantastic example. I mean, at the very beginning, when airplanes look like this, more than this, the New York Times, guys, the New York Times, okay, usually pretty embraceful of innovation, claimed it would take 1 million years to achieve powered flights. 1 million years. Of course it didn't, because many of us flew here with one of those things today, okay? Skepticism, even from very progressive outlets. And vaccines. How about another area for skepticism? At the beginning, the very beginning of the vaccines history, they were called unscientific, and there was fear of bovine contamination, really. But that's the truth. Think about what vaccines did during COVID, very recently. And actually, I like this example, because during COVID, what also happened was a collaborative effort to use the innovation for society. Companies, NGOs, civil society, governments, all got together to find the solution. Was it controversial? Yes. There's ideology involved, there's points of view, but in the end, it worked. We got over that situation that could have been much more serious, and it was already very serious. So those are all inventions and innovations that are shaping the world of today. Now, let's think about innovations that are shaping the future today, because innovation continues. It's a cycle that never stops. Again, it's with us, it's with humanity. We all know that eating too much meat may have health consequences, especially red meat. We all know that there's concerns about animal farming, especially when industrialized. There's a number of reasons, some associated even with environmental issues. So some companies in the private sector came up with other ways to develop something that tastes like meat, gives us the same or similar nutrients as meat, but it's not meat. And this is a business that's growing 7% a year on average. Think about where we may be 20 years from now. Solar power, something that South Africa is leveraging a lot very smartly, because we know that traditional sources of energy are becoming scarcer and scarcer, and one day they may end. So we're finding solutions, humanity is finding solutions using what we have and technology and innovation. 3D printing. You know where it's used a lot and where it can actually drive a lot of change? Prosthetics. Today we can develop prosthetics very rapidly thanks to 3D printing. And many other fields in medicine, and not only medicine. This is another example I like. Because we know that fuels are going to be scarce, because we know that there's environmental issues with traditional cars, we're moving away from them into electric vehicles. You think this took a day? These little things already existed in 1830. Yes, I said 1830, 1830. We have been delving with electric cars since that date, but it's only recently that thanks to innovation and the application of innovation, we managed to turn it into a reality. And here's another example I really like. For instance, the European Union has set a date for 2035 to get rid of traditional cars. How did they do it? Once again, like vaccines, collaboration. Car companies sat at a table together with NGOs, together with civil society, together with governments to define an agenda for positive change. Collaboration drives change faster. So, skepticism, we've seen it, it's part of all innovations. And it wasn't different with regards to smoke-free products. What we're going to discuss today also came up with skepticism. And this, despite all the scientific evidence that those products are a much better choice than cigarettes. And like other inventions that we've seen, smoke-free products have taken decades to come to life, but we'll see it in a second. It's not, innovation doesn't come in a day. It needs to be embraced, it needs to be adopted, it needs to be accelerated. And this innovation, like all the other innovations we have seen, can actually change the world in which we live for better, if embraced, if adopted, if regulated in a way to minimize unintended consequences and maximize benefits. Because it's been around for a while. The fact that smoking causes diseases is known. It's been known for decades. Okay, there's documents from health ministries in the 50s of the last centuries that say that. And since perhaps the 90s, if not the 80s, first in the US, then elsewhere, there's been a debate around what can we do for those who don't quit smoking. The WHO says that there's over 1 billion smokers in the world. And latest estimates, especially from, for instance, the University of Washington, say in years from now, we'll have the same number of smokers worldwide. So a key question that experts ask themselves since the 90s is, can we do something through innovation to give a choice that's a better choice for those who don't quit smoking? Because they're the vast majority out there. And behind me, you see some examples of that debate. 1997, the UN Focal Point on Tobacco or Health stated that every effort needs to be made to reduce the toxicity of the tobacco products. This is a book, actually, if you have time, it's a long book, but if you want to read it, it's very interesting and still actual today, from the Institute of Medicine in the US. We're talking about 2001. It's a gold of mine with regards to science and thinking around those products. And then 2015, the WHO stated that the main goal of comprehensive regulation of nicotine would be to minimize the use of the most dangerous products and maximize the use of others, okay? This is because the debate has been out there. And as a company, we decided to embrace it. We decided to go in the direction of change. And this is why in 2008, we've started investing heavily into those products. By 2014, we actually had products on the market in Nagoya and Milan. And the 2 test launches went well, so we decided to scale up our efforts. It was going so well because people were looking for it. I mean, smokers know they're doing something that's dangerous for their health, so they look for alternatives. They've embraced it rapidly. By 2016, we were so convinced that we were doing the right thing that we've announced that we would actually replace as soon as possible every cigarette with a better alternative based on science. That's very important. And this is a bit of our manifesto. And we also knew that like any innovation, like any change, it comes with skepticism. Sometimes people will not understand it. So we decided to crystallize this vision into 3 simple lines that would give a motto for everyone and that would put everyone around the table with an agreement. Clearly, those who don't smoke shouldn't start. Those who smoke should quit. Smoking causes diseases. That's the best thing they can do. We need to be clear about that. But also, those who don't quit should change. Because today, there are better alternatives to cigarette, less harmful alternatives based on science and technology. Why continuing with the old habit if you can do something better? And then the question is, okay, how do you make this a reality? Because it's not an easy challenge. I mean, we've seen how complex it is to turn innovations into a reality that improves society. Well, the first thing we can do is invest. Be serious about it, committed to it. And since 2008, we have invested over $14 billion to make this a reality. We have hired over 1,400 between scientists, engineers, and their staff, something that, believe me, a traditional tobacco company wasn't doing before. We didn't need it, because cigarettes have never really changed. They've always been the same. Yes, you may have had a bit of change in flavors, the filters, but ultimately the product is the same. Here, we need to invest into technology that's rapidly evolving, like all technology. We need to have the science to prove the benefits and assess the risks, right? All that you didn't need. We need different sales structures. We need different ways to communicate to consumers. All that took a real investment. And today, our products are available in 95 markets around the world, and 38 million smokers, we've seen it in the video, have adopted them, with over 70% who abandoned cigarettes. Believe me, we're on the cusp of a dramatic change in society through this. A change that could put cigarettes in a museum very, very rapidly in many countries. But we've seen it in other examples. Companies can spark the change. Companies can get it started, can kickstart it. But then, for change to become a reality faster, others need to embrace it. Consumers are embracing it. Wherever they can, consumers switch to those products. And believe me, if you ask anyone who started with a cigarette and then switched to a smoke-free product, they don't go back, because they see the improvement. But others need to play the role, like we've seen with vaccines, like we've seen with the shift to electric cars. Others need to play the role if we really want this change to happen fast. And among others, of course, governments play a key role because they define the rules of the game. They define the type of information that can be given to consumers. They define the rules of commercialization. They can encourage other companies to invest rather than investing in cigarettes, which is very lucrative, but it's not the best thing we can do today. And this is part of what we will discuss today. But I want to close this just summing up, because we've seen that innovation is really what drives our societies. We've seen that it can change our lives for better. But I also want to leave you with this thought. For it to be accelerated, we all need to make room for it, whether we're a company, a government, an NGO, the media. We all can play a role, and this is why we're here today. So I hope you enjoyed the day, and I hope that we have set this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for laying the base and the foundation.
Welcome you to today's Technovation, the platform dedicated to exploring how innovation, technology, and collaboration can shape a better future for smokers in Africa and the world. And let me start with the stark truth. Africa has a smoking problem. It is, together with Middle East, the only region of the world that has a growing number of smokers. In spite of decades of conventional tobacco control measures, the smoking rates in sub-Saharan Africa are declining only marginally, and due to the population growth, the total number of smokers are growing. According to the World Health Organization, the number of smokers in sub-Saharan Africa was 52 million in the year 2000, 66 million in 2015, and is estimated to reach 84 million this year. We are talking about a dramatic increase here, about more than 60% growth. In the same time, the smoker numbers around the world are declining, and particularly fast in the so-called global north, the developed countries in Europe, in North America, in Asia. So what is happening here? As Tommaso has explained, the advances in science and technology have resulted in new reduced risk nicotine products, smoke-free products such as heated tobacco, e-vapes, nicotine pouches that are still delivering the nicotine that smokers want and ask for, but they are eliminating the burning of tobacco. And by doing so, they greatly reduce or even eliminate the toxicants found in the cigarette smoke. Smokers have embraced these new technologies and are switching from cigarettes to smoke-free products. Tobacco industry is transforming its business. It is shifting investments into scientific research, technological development, and commercialization of these alternative products. And many governments around the world are recognizing the public health benefit of this technology-driven transformation and are supporting it with specific regulation and taxation. So these are not vision statements from corporate presentations anymore. We are talking about a technological revolution that has actually already happened. In most of the developed countries, already 20 to 40, in some cases even up to 50% of the cigarette consumption has already been replaced by smoke-free products. For us in PMI, leaders of the industry and global pioneers of this transformation, smoke-free products account for more than 40% of our global net revenues, already today. So this transformation is accelerating, and it's only a matter of time when cigarettes, this most harmful nicotine delivery technology, will end up in museums. Now, what can we in Africa do to catch up with these global trends, to address the smoking epidemic and improve lives of smokers on the continent? Fortunately, we know that Africa is good at adopting new technologies, usually with some delay, but often even providing innovations that are adapted to local circumstances. Think of aspiring technologies that were out of reach once, but have now transformed the lives of peoples on the continent, such as Wi-Fi, fundamental for connectivity at homes, schools, and businesses. Smartphones that have turned millions into digital citizens. Mobile banking, fintech, with solutions such as M-Pesa, revolutionizing access to financial services or financial access. Solar energy that brings power to off-grid communities, but also closes gaps in public power generation systems. E-commerce, telemedicine, electric mobility, e-learning, all once aspirational technologies, and now part of daily life of millions of Africans. And the same is now happening with reduced risk alternatives to smoking. Well, I started by asking what Africa can do to catch up. First, PMI is already playing its part in driving this transformation. Like most new technologies, smoke-free products are relatively expensive and they require large investments in research and development, consumer education, and in commercial infrastructure to bring these products to consumers. Tommaso mentioned that PMI since 2008 has already invested more than $14 billion in technological development of these products, their scientific substantiation, manufacturing, and commercialization. We are committed to continue investing in smoke-free products also in Africa. We are already present with our smoke-free brands, IQOS, ZYN, and VEEV, in several markets and key airport hubs in Africa, and we have an ambitious expansion strategy for the coming years. And when we do it, the competition will follow. And usually, with increased competition, there is an acceleration in penetration of new technologies. Second, smokers in Africa are already switching to reduced risk alternatives and leaving cigarettes behind. Experience of South Africa shows that African adult smokers are following global trends and they're embracing new smoke-free technologies. Once the products are made widely available at an accessible price and consumers are provided accurate information about their benefits, we see a significant switching from cigarettes to smoke-free products. Our estimates in South Africa show that already around 20% of the South African legal cigarette market has been replaced by smoke-free products. With further product innovation and cost reductions, as well as additional commercial investments, we are confident that this or similar trends will be replicated in the coming years in other African markets. And third, and maybe most important, to fast-track smoke-free Africa, governments need to champion effective policies. We see around the world that the adoption of smoke-free products is fastest in countries where adult consumers have an easy access to these products, where these products, smoke-free products, are not more expensive than cigarettes, and where consumer information is accurate and broadly available. This requires smoke-free products to have regulation and taxation which is different from the one for cigarettes. Product regulation needs to enable smoke-free products to be appealing to adult smokers in order to accelerate, facilitate their switching away from cigarettes. Communication restrictions must ensure that only accurate, factual, and not misleading information is broadly available to adult smokers. And taxation levels should enable these products to be more affordable than cigarettes. We see a rapid decline of cigarette sales in countries that do exactly that, in countries that treat reduced risk products, reduced risk nicotine technologies differently from cigarettes, such as New Zealand, US, UK, Sweden, Italy, many others. On the other hand, countries that treat these products equally as cigarettes, or in some cases even prohibit smoke-free products, they see a much, much slower decline of cigarette consumption, in some cases even a growth of their cigarette markets. We see a similar evidence in South Africa. Smoke-free categories that have more regulatory freedoms and lower tax burden, they grow much faster than those smoke-free product categories that don't have them. PMI is engaging with communities and policymakers across Africa to share the science behind smoke-free products and their potential for harm reduction. While scientific evidence is overwhelming and the rich experience from advanced markets provides a solid foundation for policy making, the progress with regulation of smoke-free products is often hampered by misinformation. Misinformation that comes usually from Western-dominated NGOs and intergovernmental organizations with a prohibitionist agenda. These so-called tobacco control advocates are de facto advocating for protection of cigarettes. They're advocating for protection of cigarettes from reduced risk substitutes for cigarettes. And by doing so, they inadvertently lobby for smokers to continue smoking cigarettes. Developed countries have mostly resisted this kind of lobbying and misinformation and have adopted a science-based approach to regulation. However, these groups are now focusing heavily on persuading policymakers in developing countries to prevent their smokers to access better alternatives or even from getting information about them. We can see the latest example of this in South Africa, where the new tobacco bill proposes equal regulation of smoke-free products and cigarettes. If it would be passed in its current form, it would prevent millions of smokers from discovering better alternatives, and it would significantly slow down the decline of cigarette consumption in South Africa. This is so nonsensical that it has triggered strong opposition by a myriad of stakeholders, public health experts, doctors, scientists, and various policymakers. And it is this debate that has been created, and also commitment of the government of national unity to evidence-based policymaking that gives us confidence that scientific data and real-life experience internationally will be taken into account, and that tobacco bill will ultimately differentiate between smoke-free products and cigarettes. Africa can catch up with developed countries only by leveraging science-based, differentiated regulation to scientifically accelerate its smoke-free transformation. And to conclude, Africa can address the smoking epidemic and can catch up with the positive technological change in the developed world only if the industry, consumers, and policymakers all play their parts. Let's not miss this moment. Let's choose innovation over inertia. Let's choose science over sentiment and progress over prejudice. Together, we can help millions of Africans, millions of African adult smokers move toward a better future, a future free from smoke. Thank you.
We are very curious with my family, and together with my 2 sons and my husband, we came to travel across sub-Saharan Africa. We landed here in the Capetown, so the beautiful picture which Brane showed, your Table Mountain and your lion's head and everything, I saw it from the first time from the plane. It's beautiful with the ocean. And we traveled across South African Republic, then we went to Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Lesotho, Eswatini. Anybody here from those countries? Yes, good, good, good. So I really fell in love with this continent already then. And I never ever thought that I would be standing in front of you in a very different capacity today. What was happening on the other side, so I was enjoying this beautiful continent, beautiful people, beautiful nature. We went to Kruger, Victoria Falls, etc. So really, really beautiful. And what was happening on the other side of my life was I was in charge of business in the central part of Europe, Czech, Slovakia, Hungary. You know, somewhere close to Germany, Poland. Yes, you can visualize that. So I was on the launch of smoke-free products in these markets. The first one was IQOS, the one which you already know also here in the South Africa, in the Republic of South Africa. And you know what? It was a very moving moment for me, actually, in my life, in my professional life, because I honestly do remember the first person, adult smoker, who switched from cigarettes to IQOS. He reached out to me, and it was even before the launch of IQOS in the Czech Republic. At that time, the IQOS was acceptable, was launched, was available in maybe 10, 15 markets in the world, and he really wanted to abandon the world of smoke, and he wanted to join this smoke-free world. And I remember him, and I know him, we are still in contact, and I can tell you his life, the life of his loved ones, the life of his family, friends, changed significantly as of that day. And I also remember, so the first one, I remember the first 20. I remember when we were at the level of 50,000, 60,000. So that's the size of the stadium here. Yes, in the Capetown soccer rugby, it's around 60,000. So I remember when we were at around that level in the Czech Republic. By the end of the year, actually, in 6-7 months, we managed to get there. And now currently, we are at the level that out of 4, one of the adult users of nicotine is out of combustion, out of fire, out of burning. And it gives me a lot of satisfaction, and it gives me a lot of motivation to stay here in front of you and to share what I believe Africa can and should do to accelerate this transformation. Because nobody, really nobody, needs to smoke in the 21st century. And we know that the fire and the burning is a problem, because when we look at other parts of our lives, whether we look at energy, how do we consume energy, how do we produce energy, how do we take care of our agricultural fields, yes? Sometimes we used to burn them. We don't burn them anymore. We do use a very different technique, because we know that burning and fire, while good for certain purposes, for some other purposes are very, very dangerous and are lethal. The same happens with cars, and we had the example with Tommaso, and we had some examples from Brane. So outside of nicotine, outside of tobacco, this is very normal, yes? Would you agree with that? Yes, very good. We also know that when we look at closer to here to South Africa, the new innovation, technology and science, which is brought by the 21st century, is really benefiting other parts of our lives. You are very advanced, and consumers, users are really ready to switch their behaviors when we are talking about medicine. Telemedicine is really picking up very nicely, yes? And it's serving humanity for a good thing. The same is happening with the renewable energy. We know that coal, okay, it was the substance which was used in the 19th, 20th century, but in the 21st, Sub-Saharan Africa and South African Republic, you are really pioneering the solar energy, the wind energy. As I was flying on the plane, I saw that. So really abandoning fire, abandoning burning in the areas where we don't need to do that. The same is the vaccination, the production of local vaccines here. Innovation, science, technology, 21st century. It's really, really amazing. So it can be done, and we are moving into that directions. Now, we know that the laws are very important. Regulation is super important. We all know that nobody who doesn't have a driving license shouldn't drive. It's public knowledge, yes? We know that if you have 1 beer, 2 beers, or whatever, a bit of alcohol, you shouldn't drive. We also know that you should be wearing your seatbelt when you are driving. And there are many, many other laws. Does it always work? No, it doesn't. Because it sometimes, and in majority of cases, actually, we humans, we are very routine-oriented, and it takes a lot of effort to change the human behavior, and to even if we know that it's a better choice, it takes a village to change something, what we were doing yesterday, to something what we should do today and tomorrow. Whether it is in the preventive medicine, so vaccination, whether it's, as I mentioned, safe driving or even eating. Everybody knows how a healthy meal looks like. Don't you know that? Everybody knows. And would you have a burger today? Yes, even I would have a burger today. Yes? So, but at least through the laws, the regulation, then the public discussion, the village approach, because it really takes a village to change the behaviors through engagement of not only regulators, but also medical experts, scientists. Media play a very important role, so I hope you are going to help us with this, okay? That's why you are in this room. And also the government policy. It really takes a 360 approach to motivate people to make the better choices. Better choices, public knowledge, fire burning, we all know what's happening there. Now, how does it look in the world of nicotine? Is the world changing in the consumption of nicotine? When we look at the map, we see that it's really mixed. While our products from Philip Morris are available in 95 markets, you can see that when you look at the map, I could actually draw a line here in the middle. Would you agree? Do you see that line? Yes? And the line would be doing what? The line would be dividing the north and the south hemisphere. Okay? So it looks like the smoke-free products are available pretty much nearly everywhere in the northern part of the hemisphere. And what's happening in the southern part? It looks a little bit like a problem. Yeah? So what I can tell you from my experience, what was happening in this part of the world, because I come from this little country here, and when I was working there, we have a political entity which is called European Union. Have you heard about that? Yes. 27 countries are a part of it. You know what was happening already as early as the year 2014 in the European Union? They were forming, and they formed, a regulatory environment. So a piece of legislation, 2014, they introduced 2 new categories of tobacco and nicotine products, which were not even on the market. But they saw them arising in some parts of the world. They heard and they were reading about innovation, progress, science, technology, and everything. And they said, we need to be ahead of these products. And they took a very, very rational approach in the European Union. They said, if these products are not burning, if there is no fire, they must be, first, there needs to be a category which is really different created. So there was a category of novel tobacco products, there is a category of e-cigarettes, vaping, and they said the regulation and fiscality to these products needs to be different because they are on a different part of line on the risk continuum. This was in 2014 on the level of the European Union. Then the individual member states, they took that piece of legislation, put it into their regulation, and they defined the individual elements of regulation and of fiscality. So, coming back to year 2017, when we were launching these products in Czech, Slovakia, and Hungary, we already had the regulation ready. New category for regulation, so how does that product needs to look like, what are the rules for the, what do we do with the product in the shop, how can we communicate that product to the consumers, to the adult smokers who would otherwise continue smoking, what is the tax level on that product, etc., etc. So basically, the regulation made it really, really easier for the consumer, because they understood the concept of these products, for us, for industry, to bring the product, and for the government to really enforce these rules on the ground. And that's why we could really bring it to the ground in 2017, and that's why we were at the level of 60,000, 70,000 within the first 6 months, and really growing pretty fast. Now you say, okay, maybe volume, you can put anything on the map, but if we, unpeel the onion, we take one layer down, how does it look on the ground? Oops. this is, okay, before I go there, this is important. So coming back again to this map and to the line which is in the middle, global north, global south. You can see with everything what I said about regulation and the readiness of the regulatory and fiscal environment, we really brought the products there. However, Africa is really sticking out. It looks like Africa is really missing out on this opportunity, on the opportunity which I said nobody needs to smoke in the 21st century. And guys, as I said, when I said it takes a village, it really, really needs also the engagement and the role you as the media representatives can play. Because when we look at some other elements of linked to Africa, we can see that 80% of the current smokers are coming actually from emerging economies. Brane mentioned 84 million adult smokers estimated to be on the continent of Africa in the year 2025. 84 million, okay? That's a really huge number. And addressable countries, 48. So it's really now, after what I mentioned about EU, European continent, and when we look at Africa, I think the moment is here not to ask why and whether Africa should go that direction, but how and what is it that we can do so that we leapfrog to where the global north is. Now coming back to unpeeling the onion, how does it look like in these countries of the global north? You can see, if I focus on those 3 countries which I mentioned before, Hungary, now if you have 2 users of nicotine, one of them is not in the smoking, in the burning business anymore. Okay, so nearly 50% of people living in Budapest are already consuming something which is significantly better for them, for their loved ones, and for the population at large. When we look at Bratislava, Slovakia, or Prague, it's 1 in 3, 1 in 4 total adult users of nicotine. They are not really in the world of burning and in the world of cigarettes. That is really, really encouraging, because it proves that when we have the regulation, when we have the right products, the consumers are super ready. So what we have seen in the area of technology, what we have seen in the area of other parts of the life, agriculture, we really see that the consumers, people are ready. Once the product is here, information is here, they move. That's super encouraging. This is the northern part of the hemisphere. But there were certain, while the bottom part was a little bit whiter, there were several countries where these products are available. How does it score there? Is it scoring well? Look, it's scoring comparably well. So these countries are coming to the table a little bit later, but we can see the countries like Philippines, yes, 2.7, nearly 3%. We can see Mexico. We can see Egypt, 7.5. We can see the Montenegro and Macedonia really, really scoring very high. So what I am trying to say is that these products and the arrival and the outswitching of burning and fire in the consumption of nicotine is transferable from every continent, across all the continents. It's really globally transferable. When you look at this slide, what are you missing there? Are you missing something there? You're missing 1, 2, 3, or maybe 48 capitals of the countries in the sub-Saharan Africa. I am missing them as well. So together with you today, whether now in the discussion panel or when we have time to have a chat individually, let us really think critically and positively what is it that Africa can and should do so that, again, we leapfrog together and we catch up with those countries in the north part of the world, because those products are for everybody. Now, so this is how it works when everything is okay. Yeah? If we flip the coin, how does it look like if the countries choose the road which is based on emotions, or they decide to sit on the fence and see. What they do is they make the regulation of combustible products or cigarettes really excessive. So they do everything what is available there. They touch the pack and they say, no, there will be plain packaging so the product will look like a commodity. They say, we will put graphical health warnings there. We will hide the products in the stores. We will stop the communications in the stores. They will do everything, plus on the combustible, plus they will ban the newly arriving significantly better products, so smoke-free products. What happens in that market? And we have more than a decade evidence that nothing happens with the smoking incidents. People simply continue doing what they have been doing for the last decades and more than decades. The behavior of consumers doesn't change. What happens to the smoking incidents, so the percentage of those smoking, you can see that the decrease is really very, very small, nearly non-existent. On the other hand, coming back to the other side of the coin, much more positive and encouraging, what happens in the countries where they do regulate conventional product cigarettes, and they do regulate smoke-free products, because these products also need to be regulated in the area of communication, sales, packaging, fiscality, etc. What happens there? The information about the product and the product becomes available, and this is what happens to the smoking rates. Yes, they really decline at the level of high tens. And if we look at New Zealand, which is the last one here, and I can give another examples of UK or US, if the government, in addition to regulatory framework, they add the policy and the encouragement, the promotion of this better choice, the consumers, the people really switch out of cigarettes and go into better products at the level more than 50%. So again today, I think the question we need to ask ourselves is not whether and why, but how should Africa proceed further? What is the road that we want to take together so that the adult smokers who would otherwise continue smoking are given the information, are given the choice, and are given the products which are significantly better? The last slide is the recipe, which I think has worked for other countries and which we believe would work here as well. Regulation. We need a regulated market access and availability of these products. These products need to be here. Actually, we know that these products are already here, even in the South Africa. We know that approximately 20% of smokers are already on vape, but nobody knows, and the kind of products is a little bit a question mark because the regulation doesn't exist. So it's much better to regulate it for the state, for the consumer, for the industry, and allow those products in the markets. Second thing is acceptability, and that is important because, again, an excessive and too much over-regulated approach doesn't work, because what do we want? We want an adult smoker to switch out of the world of fire and burning into the world where nicotine is consumed in a better format. So nicotine needs to be there and at an acceptable and really relevant level. Sometimes we know that there are also some flavors which are supporting and helping the adult smokers to switch out of cigarettes because it's a big behavior change. So certain elements need to be there, and that's why the product needs to be acceptable. The third element is awareness, is the access to information. Again, it's not the existence of the rule, it's also the policy, and again, it's the role of the village, is the mama, is the grandma, is the teacher, is the priest, is the, I don't know who else in the village, and is the government making the policy, really sharing information proactively so that the person, the adult smoker, is encouraged and feels comforted in a way, supported of switching out of the previous habit into changed behavior. And the last one, and we are very cognizant of that, especially on the territory of countries like Africa here, is the affordability of the offers which are on the table. And we are working very hard on that, because we really want every adult smoker to have the right and to have access to better products. You heard our CEO actually at the beginning, Jacek. He said that his dream is to put cigarettes into museum, and ours is too. And for that, affordability is the last important element. So here, Africa, since the year 2017, it has been a really, really long journey where the northern part of the world has been riding very fast and with a lot of comfort and with a lot of good evidence and encouraging feedback and adoption from adult smokers. So I really do count on your support, putting Africa on that route again and really defining the way and the elements which we need so that together we leapfrog into a better future. Thank you very much.